Okay, party people! In my head, I have that tag team back again going on, and maybe that'll be my opening intro, but I kind of wanted to do like a hi-ho thing to go along with today's book, which is Winter. And Winter is the story of Snow White. And I gotta say, I was disappointed. This was the most disappointing book of the series for me. And I think that's compounded by the fact that I had higher expectations, because I vividly remember disliking this book my first time through. And so I was hoping I would have a different feel for it this time, that maybe it would come across differently, or I would see it differently, or just something would have changed in the 5 or 6 years that it's been since I've read this series. And I think I was let down more than ever before, because I simply wasn't convinced that Winter was the character she needed to be. And that is, caveat here, if you haven't read the books, if you haven't seen my reviews, you really need to go do that to get context. But the thing about Winter is that she is from Luna, and the Lunars have this lunar gift, which means that they can manipulate people's bioelectricity, and that essentially means that they can make them think and do whatever the controller wants. However, if you do not exercise this lunar gift, it can cause you to suffer from something called lunar sickness, which basically means you go crazy. And Winter, at some point in her life, decided not to use her lunar gift. So she has slowly gotten crazier and crazier. But to me, it never came across as crazy. It just came across as childish. Like she was a child rather than a 17, 18-year-old young woman. And then add to that the fact that, sorry, I need to take a breath. Oh my gosh. Add to that the fact that she has this romance-ish going on with a young 20-something-year-old, I thought was a really awkward juxtaposition. And there was literally only one instance in this whole book that I really said, that girl's crazy. Otherwise, I think what did it for me, what prevented me from really sinking into this lunar sickness, was how sane she was. And I actually wouldn't have minded if I'd gotten a little bit of both, and that made me question, is she crazy or is she pretending to be crazy? Because there are times when the other characters would say, wow, she's so normal, and then they'd be like, she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So even to have them saying what's going on with Winter would have made me continue to question, who is Winter? So me questioning what kind of character Winter is, it gives her more depth. Is she pretending or is she not pretending? But as I said, she's so sane throughout so much of the book. Like, she knows when to pretend to be crazy because she knows that people will believe it. And so I'm like, if you are that manipulative, why am I going to believe that you're actually suffering from the lunar sickness? But then, yes, the whole thing with Jason, her bodyguard, or not even her bodyguard, he is a guard within the lunar army. I'm like, it kind of grossed me out because she felt like a child. And then for her to have this romance thing going on with a 20-something-year-old man, I couldn't get it out of my head that maybe she was 13 and that he was a much older, much more mature man who is completely out of her range. And so it kind of got a little pedophilic to me. So Winter, I really wanted to not be negative. But I don't have many good things to say about this book. Because on top of the problems I had with the character of Winter, by the time we get to the book Winter, we're going on 10 narrative point of views. We have Cinder, we have Scarlet, we have Cress, and then we have each of their love interests, which means we have Kai, we have Wolf, we have Thorn, And then we have Winter, we have Jason, we have Aiko, we have Queen Levana, we have maybe one or two others that get thrown in there. And because there's so much going on, the story falls by the wayside. The characterization of Winter falls by the wayside. Because I think what makes Cinder, the book Cinder, so great, and what attached me so easily to Cinder was we got a handful of perspectives from other characters. But by and large, I got to know Cinder. But with each progressive book, even though they were focused on a certain character, like they were named after a certain character, ergo it was supposed to be about that character and introducing them to the family, we didn't get to spend much time with them. And so by the time we get to Winter, I'm like, I don't care. Because they all have their own drama. It takes away from the main problem of the series, which is defeating Queen Levana and putting Cinder on the throne. And I mentioned it before with Cinder, how I felt like I didn't get to see her development as a character. And so then by the time we're getting to Winter, what's emphasized to me is just getting Levana off the throne. But I'm not convinced that Cinder is the one who needs to replace her on the throne, because I don't know if Cinder is ready for that. All the focus is just getting Levana off, not knowing what she'll do when she's on there. So while I remembered kind of the high points of all of these books, with Winter, I couldn't remember if Cinder actually took the throne or if she perhaps gave it to Winter, because Winter is the princess that everybody has known. The thing with the Lunars is the throne is passed down through the bloodline. Winter is not Queen Levana's real daughter. She is her stepdaughter, which, please Lord, I hope that I remember to talk about Levana and her true husband, because actually I'm just talking about it now. We get a whole lot more of this in Fairest. But one thing I was disappointed with when we got to Winter, which, thick book, y'all, thick book. I think it was Cinder, I don't remember which, it could have been Scarlet. It's an early novel, I think it must have been Scarlet. We get this foreshadowing of Queen Levana having a ring and mentioning her true husband. Okay, we're gonna get something about Levana eventually, and about this guy, and about why he's so important to her, and you get it in Fairest. But the story ends in Winter, and we never get anything about that, except we get the name of the guy, and we get that he is Winter's dad. And so I was just like, I know you get to it eventually, but this is not part of the series. Like this is not playing into the overarching dilemma. So this shouldn't even be a factor in what's going on. This should just be a supplement. So even though I'm okay with it expanding on Winter and her dad, I wanted to know who he was and why he was so important in the series, not in the novella. So Winter just had a lot of disappointments. And then so to get back to the actual character of Winter, I know I need to get on to the plot summary, but I just can't. Not yet. Winter as a character, aside from feeling like a child, I thought she was the flattest, most one-dimensional character of them all, because she's entirely too perfect. And she doesn't add anything to the series. We find out in Cress that Scarlet has been kidnapped and taken to Luna, and then she is essentially rescued by Winter. And then in Winter, we finally get to see Scarlet and what's going on with Scarlet, and that she's being kept in a cage in Queen Levana's menagerie. Winter is coming to visit Scarlet and take care of her and kind of befriend her, and Scarlet had been forced to chop off a finger, and so Winter was bringing her these little sour apple candies, which I love. It's a little homage to the Snow White theme. And I guess they were actually filled with medicine Although I'm not sure if that's something that was specifically done by Winter for Scarlet or blah, blah, blah. But so we're introduced to her a little bit in Scarlet, and then we finally get to see her. But she's not part of the revolution. She's really, really, really weak. And I feel like it's best shown when they're all, the whole gang is trying to figure out how to defeat Levana. And they're all going about their own plans, which is something else that I really hope that I remember to talk about. Because this book was just an ultimate failure for me in terms of culmination. And so Winter and Scarlet decide to try to recruit the wolf men. Winter has this certainty about their mission to find these guys and recruit them. And Scarlet is like, are you serious? Scarlet is my favorite character of them all. I think it's because I can relate to her the most, even though I thought her book before I read Winter was the weakest. I thought there's a lot of issues there with characterization and plot. But she's still my favorite character from the outside. Like, when we don't have to focus on her, I think she's great. And so she's like, Winter, this is the stupidest thing you've ever come up with. They're gonna kill us. What are you doing? We get to the wolf den, and Winter automatically freezes up. And she can't say a thing, she can't do a thing. And Scarlet ends up having to take charge. And for me, I love it because that's Scarlet in a nutshell. And I really like that about her. But this was a huge missed opportunity for Winter to show development, because it was her moment to overcome things, to be brave, to do what needed to be done, and she freezes up. And so even though Scarlet's coming to her rescue, the Wolfmen are still going to do whatever they're going to do to him until Winter goes crazy. And I've already discussed how I feel about her lunar sickness, and I thought this was an easy out that Meyer took. I know it's supposed to go back to Winter's characterization, but because it was so poorly done and I was unconvinced, I was just like, Meyer, you couldn't have had her step up and do something? Instead, you had to have her fall back on her mental health, which I am not trying to degrade mental health. I've been there, but within the context of the novel, I thought it was the easy way out. So then Winter goes and sinks into herself, and the Wolfmen are like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with her? Oh, there's something terribly wrong with her. We need to side with them, because this is a legit issue, which mental health is a legit issue. But for the intents and purposes of this book, it could have been done better. It's actually funny. It reminds me of this moment when I was a kid. I mean, if you can't tell, I'm super dramatic. All right? I just am. And my best friend had moved away, and I was all alone on the playground, and nobody would pay attention to me. So I pretended to see her so that I could attract attention. And that's exactly how I felt this little scene went, where Winter lost her nerve, and so she just had to fall back on a way to gain attention so that people would rally around her. I'm not saying that was Meyer's intent. That's not what I'm saying at all. But maybe that's just me being negative and dramatic and blah, blah, blah. Let me get on to the plot before I talk more about all of my problems. One really great aspect about this series is they are very seamless. So sometimes it's actually hard for me to remember where one book ended and one book picks up. So I do like that aspect. In Winter, as I said, we pick up with Winter taking care of Scarlet. Cinder and her gang have dropped Kai off on Earth, and he is trying to reconcile things with Levana because Cinder and them had interrupted the marriage ceremony. But then she has her wolf army come to Earth and start destroying things. And so they're like, oh my gosh, in order to stop this, we got to bring Kai back, and then blah, blah, blah. So that's what they're doing. That's what he's doing, is trying to appease her. And she's essentially like, we're going to get married next week. And the plan that he'd come up with Cinder and them was, we'll just go to Luna and we'll invade Luna because it is safer for our people if we just go there rather than have all those Lunars come here to Earth. So yes, that's what they're doing. Meanwhile, Winter is doing whatever she's doing with Scarlet, and she's just super duper boring. But Jason had been kidnapped and brought back to Luna. Not kidnapped, but he had been discovered during the whole thing in the last book and had been brought back to Luna. And so now he's facing his trial and he's going to be put to death. And then he's not, and he's assigned to Winter as a guard. And we get that really disturbing relationship between the two of them, which, on top of how I feel like they are emotionally and mentally. Okay, I love a good princess story. I know a lot of people really dislike the whole Disney aspect of you need a man to be happy. That's what I grew up with. It's what gives me the warm fuzzies. I see the point of women need to be self-empowered and all that. But in this book, between Winter and Jason, I really understand women's complaints about men are the hero, because their relationship to me was she could do nothing for herself and he had to be this strong protector for her, and everything he did was for Winter, who is so incredibly perfect, even though she does nothing. I did see what Meyer was trying to do in weaving in the Snow Whiteness of it all, but it's like she took the idea of Snow White and then she gave her no meat. They're doing their thing, and then all of a sudden Queen Levana brings him in and she says, you need to kill her. And so he pretends to kill her by killing a white wolf, and then he sets her and Scarlet free, and now they are on this journey to escape Artemisia. And it just so happens that Jason has directed them to the same exact place that Cinder and everybody are, because Cinder and them infiltrate Luna, and then at the sacrifice of leaving Cress behind, they are able to get to an outlying district where Wolf's family lives, and Cinder is now enacting her plan to reveal that she is Princess Celine and that she's coming for her crown. And then obviously this causes problems with Queen Levana and all that, because she's like, no uprisings in my world. And this is something else that I kind of had a problem with. Like, I was getting strong Hunger Games vibes here, but I don't feel like it was executed as successfully. Cinder, I've gotten really nothing about her capabilities as a leader, and convinced that she needs to be the queen, that she can do this, because she didn't have any plans. Harry Potter is my favorite series, and I know you guys are all probably thinking, well, what about in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and they escape Gringotts on the dragon, and then they land and they're gonna go to Hogwarts, and his friends point out that their plans never work. Well, get it. Sometimes plans don't work out. That's not my problem. My problem is I want to feel like there is a plan. Like what they're doing can actually lead to something. Not that they're just kind of hanging around hoping something will work out. Cinder and them are putting word out only for Levana's people, because everything is on camera. So they're able to discover which outline area Cinder and them are in, and they're able to just come. And I know this synopsis is taking a super long time, but I just keep remembering all the problems I'm having with it. And so now we're back to that whole lunar gift thing that I talked about in Cress, where the more I read about it, the bigger issue I have with it. Because if you want to just look at it on the surface, it's a great story problem. But if you think about it, there are so many holes with this ability to manipulate people's bioelectricity, because unless you're a shell, there's no way to combat it. And in some ways, I think it's kind of great, because you do have complete and total control. But in other ways, if Levana herself can control hundreds of people, and then she has all of her thaumaturges who can control hundreds of people, and then they have their wolf army who can only be controlled by certain thaumaturges, what chance does anybody else have to win? And I know I'm getting way outside the scope of the story, but if you want to place it into a larger context of if this were something that were happening in the real world, like, how unfair is that for someone to have such autonomy? It's not interesting as a story, and it's something that if you had to experience it, you're like, well, how's anybody supposed to succeed against you? And then I keep thinking about the instance when Cinder has come head to head with Sybil Mira when they're trying to escape the palace with Kai. And the only way she's able to defeat Sybil is by realizing that Sybil, in her attempts to control Wolf, has left part of her brain unattended. So Cinder is able to kind of creep in there and drive her mad. I thought that was absolutely fantastic, because I thought we were finally getting somewhere with finding a chink in this lunar gift armor, only for it to not go anywhere at all for the rest of the series. Like, she never attempts to do it again. The only thing that she does realize is, I don't necessarily have to control people, but I can affect how they feel, what they're thinking. Like, I can inject them with encouraging thoughts, which I'm not inserting my will over theirs. I'm just helping them do something better than maybe they could have before. But I was just like, this whole lunar gift thing is so ludicrous to me. There was so much going on in this book that I got so bored, and I did start to skip. And so I'm sure there was a great deal that I missed in terms of how she was able to finally overcome Levana and Levana's forces despite their advantages gift-wise. But the gift, incredibly underdeveloped. It could have been much better than it really was, but instead it was like Meyer couldn't think of any other way to get where she wanted to go except to say, these people can do whatever they want and nobody can fight against it. Anywho, so yes, Cinder and her friends are in this one outline area. Levana sends some soldiers and some thaumaturges, and they quickly are able to capture Cinder and Wolf. Scarlet and Thorn are kind of like sharpshooters, except they're really bad sharpshooters and they're completely ineffective. And then Aiko, this book suffered from so many miscellaneous points of view, it's ridiculous. Like, Meyer could have better spent her time developing her plot and strengthening Cinder, but instead she chose to give us a scene with Pearl. She chose to give us scenes with Aiko. And I'm like, I really could have figured it out in another context. Like, with Aiko, what happens is she faces a thaumaturge and some soldiers, and she's able to get away. But then the one soldier who kind of lets her get away once he realized that everybody had been lying about Winter's death, he, in front of Cinder, says he had disabled Aiko. And so now Cinder is just completely distraught until she learns that that's not the case. And I would have preferred to have just felt it along with Cinder rather than having the knowledge that Aiko was actually fine, because I think it would have drawn more emotion from me, because even though Aiko was really getting on my nerves by this point, she's supposed to be a comic relief, a comic foil. She's supposed to be funny, but instead she just got to be irritating because I was like, wrong time and place, okay? I enjoy Meyer's voice, the cynicism, the humor, all of that. I really, really enjoy it, but I thought she went a little overboard with Aiko sometimes. But I would have enjoyed the emotion that I got from mourning Aiko, because as much as we hate our good guys to die or get hurt, you kind of need it. So as much as I would have hated that feeling of loss for a period of time, it would have been so much more joyful when there's the reunion between Cinder and Aiko. And then, like, the same thing with Pearl. I really didn't need to see her and Audrey get kidnapped. I think it would have been just as effective when Cinder gets taken and brought to the jail, that she has to share this cell with her stepsister and stepmother. Like, I think that would have been a really great surprise where it's like, oh my gosh, these people are back. But on the same token, with Pearl and Audrey, I do see why they were brought back in Winter, but at the same time, it felt like a waste of time. And maybe this is evidence of really good writing, because I got so angry with them because they showed no growth whatsoever. And so that's when I fight with myself. Should they show growth? Should they not show growth? I mean, they're such minor characters. But you do hope that some of these characters learn something, because there's all these misconceptions against Cinder because she's part cyborg. And so you kind of do hope that Audrey and Pearl, over a period of time, are finally able to see Cinder for who she really is, and that she's a worthwhile person despite the fact that she's got cyborg in her. And they don't. They're ready to throw her under the bus at every opportunity. Even when they're in the jail cell and she's talking to them and she's trying to get reason into them, and they're just like, oh no, you're so scary. Why did Garen waste his time on you? Blah, 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 blah. And I was just, so yeah, it could have been a really great moment in many ways, but because of other factors, their reintroduction, I thought, was incredibly useless. Just a waste of my time and a waste of the book's time. Cinder's in jail. We don't know what has happened to Wolf. Scarlet and Thorn are still trying to create an uprising, as are Winter. Actually, Winter was with Scarlet because they'd all reunited. So yes, as is Winter, and then Jason has been reunited. And then I don't know how I missed this, guys, but yes, so Winter encounters somebody who gives her the apple in the shape of those little candies, and it turns out it's poisonous, and or just infused with letumosis, which has now become mutated so that Lunars can contract it. This virus, this new strain, works much faster and it spreads much faster. So then also Scarlet has gotten it. And by the time that Cinder and Jason, who convoluted, they're together, by the time that they have come back to this outline area with the antidote, many people have letumosis. But it brings us back to the Snow White narrative, where Winter has been placed in this cryogenic chamber. And so, like, as much as I didn't like Winter, as much as I didn't like the way that Meyer executed the Snow White story within this installment, when she actually gets to the Snow White elements, I think they're pretty brilliant. And if I'm counting correctly, Snow White, okay, Winter is Snow White, and then her 7 dwarves would be Cinder, Scarlet, Cress, Thorn, Wolf, Kai, and Aiko. So I was like, that's really clever. I didn't even see that coming. I knew there was this large cast of characters and it was super overwhelming in terms of narrative, but what? So I really enjoyed when she finally would pull Snow White elements into it. But, anyways, so long story short, Sorry, I was going to tell you another story, but I'm trying to make it short, so I'm not going to do it. Cinder is able to defeat Lavanna. Lavanna and Kai actually do get married, and then they are on the brink of the coronation of making her empress, which actually does happen. So those were great elements too, because those are things you're just like, don't happen, don't happen, don't happen. Bad things are gonna happen if you actually go through with the marriage and if she's actually crowned empress, but they do happen. So I thought there were instances where my whole body, my brain was like, no, 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 and Meyer made it happen anyways, and it was super fantastic. So yes, those things happen. Cinder storms the palace with her army and things are going badly. We finally learn what happened to Wolf, and that is that he was basically given that last stage of alteration so that he's not so much a man as he is a wolf. And I have some issues with that because it's like crossbreeding, you know? Now that Scarlet and Wolf are a thing, I'd rather he be human rather than a wolf. Whatever. They're able to defeat Lavanna. They show her true nature to the crowd, which is something else I wish we'd gotten to before this book, because this is really about how Lavanna got to be who Lavanna is and why she wears the glamour she does and really what's wrong with her, what's going on underneath. And so I do wish that we'd gotten more of that development of her. In the end, we don't, but this book, I know I'm getting ahead, really, really great. It's probably my favorite, and it's probably because you only get one point of view. So Cinder, you know, they're having this showdown, and she ends up getting shot by Lavanna. She ends up shooting Lavanna in turn, and then we kind of end, and we don't know what happened. Everybody's injured, and we pick up sometime later, and we learn that Cinder's fine. She'd actually been shot in one of the cyborg parts of her heart, and so she's just A-okay. Winter, she finally used her gift, because there was one of the thaumaturges. So Sybil Mirror dies, and we get another thaumaturge who has this obsession with Winter, and then she rejects him, and he gets super angry, and so now he's like, I'm gonna take you no matter what, and she uses her lunar gift to make Scarlet murder him, all of which I understand what Meyer said, but I still don't get it. And this causes her to kind of go over the edge, which I just can't. She's kind of in the state of healing towards the end, and everybody's going back to what they're going to do. We're having our happily ever afters. All the couples are getting their happily ever afters. And Cinder tells Kai that she is considering dissolving the monarchy on Luna. And I'm like, I don't know how to feel about that, because we all knew something had to happen so that Cinder and Kai could be together, and she's on the moon, he's on Earth, like, how's that gonna happen? But I was just like, so, again, you just dropped it there? Like, that's just how it's gonna be? I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I'm gonna just briefly touch on the fact that all of these love stories made me want to vomit. I think if I were a teenager, or if I just were so cynical, I wouldn't mind it, because I don't remember disliking how they all got their happily ever afters. But after you read a certain amount, you kind of wish more bad things would have happened. That maybe not everybody had survived. Because as much as we hate seeing our favorite characters die, sometimes that makes a story better. Tragedy makes it better. And yeah, Wolf was kind of turned into a wolf, and Thorn lost a couple fingers, but they all got what they wanted in the end. And I've mentioned in the past, Thorn is probably my favorite character outside of Scarlet. I think he's fantastic. Cress has had this massive crush on him. I really enjoyed the way they played off of each other, because Thorn, he was just a rogue. But in Winter, you see him acknowledging his feelings for Cress, but not wanting to acknowledge his feelings for Cress. And it got really sappy. And then they have their moment where she gets all hot and bothered because he's glamored by a Lunar into a makeout session. And so Cress is all like, and then when the Lunar leaves, she's like, man, He's like, whoa, whoa, what? And then they're like, meh, meh, meh. Or an exes will like, mwah. I'm like, really? It just, I was like, it could have been better. And yeah, so yeah, okay. Give me a moment. And I know you guys are hoping I would forget, but I didn't. I want someone to take this book home, okay? So please, like, comment, subscribe. Tell me why you should get the free copy of Cinder. I want to get this off my bookshelves and put it into the hands of somebody who will love it. So yes, my giveaway is still going on. Catch you on the flip side.